All set?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome back to our webinar series. We are so excited to have Dr. Dana Johnson here with us tonight. Dana, we learned so much from you, and I know I have been sharing your YouTube channel with so many families, and we're so grateful for your expertise. You're truly changing the trajectory for so many people with autism and their families. Thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely.
Before we begin, whether you're joining us on Zoom or Facebook, feel free to put your questions into the chat or comments. We have our board chair, Wendy Fournier, and our president, Christine Siegel, here to help moderate, and we'll do our best to get to as many Q&As as possible. While I introduce Dr. Johnson, if everyone could please type into the comments where you're joining us from. And also, if you have any suggestions on webinar topics for the future, we would love to hear from you. Okay. For more than 20 years, Dr. Johnson has worked alongside incredible families who have taught her what true resilience, patience, and hope look like. Through this work, she has learned that two things can be true at once. Your child can struggle and make incredible progress at the same time. Recognizing that too many professionals didn't know how to help these families, Dr. Johnson created her YouTube channel, The Autism and Apraxia Doctor, and expanded her reach across multiple platforms to educate professionals in the autism field. She specializes in helping individuals with complex autism, whole body apraxia, and other neurodevelopmental disabilities develop intentional motor skills and improve their overall health. Her mission is to empower families and professionals to see autism through a new lens, one that recognizes the body-brain connection, promotes health, and opens doors to possibilities many once thought were out of reach. Her work is rooted in a deep belief that her clients are capable, intelligent, and deserving of the support needed to unlock their full potential. Dr. Johnson is the founder of Speller Center Tampa and Atlanta, the founder of Invictus Academy Tampa Bay, and the co-creator of Speller's Method. She holds a master's degree in occupational therapy and a PhD in child mental health and development. Dr. Johnson is the producer of the award-winning documentary Spellers, executive producer of Underestimated, The Heroic Rise of Non-Speaking Spellers, and co-author of the Spellers Guidebook, Practical Advice for Parents and Students. She also serves on the Medical Science and Advisory Board for Documenting Hope. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Dana. We're so excited.
Thank you. I'm excited too. I just sit here and I listen. I'm like, oh, I got to shorten that. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, is she almost done yet? Is she almost done yet?
that's because you've done so much for all of our families.
Alrighty. So I can just share my screen, right? Get right to it.
And
Alrighty. Here we go. All right. Is that good? Can we see it?
yep.
Okay. Perfect. I'm just going to move the, there we go. Okay, everything covers up my screen, so I have to do some shifting a little bit. But thank you so much, Krystal and Wendy and Christine. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to talk with you all about essentially whole body apraxia. And as Krystal mentioned, I did start a YouTube channel. It was really just it was born out of families coming to see me and I felt like I was repeating the same thing over because they just didn't know. It was like, I don't know about apraxia, whole body apraxia. And I certainly have professionals that are working as part of our team for my child, and they don't know about this. They've never heard about it. So that is really where it was kind of just this fun thing. And then the feedback that I've gotten has been, this is so great because I can share it with people. So I'll talk a little bit about it, but essentially, the entire channel it just surrounds autism, specifically those with complex autism, those who are non-speaking or nonverbal, have medical complications, other health issues that really do look like behavior. And so that's where this talk really, I wanted to give this talk because I really see this over and over that we tend to look at what we're observing as parents or other professionals and then just equate it to this is intentional. This is what they're doing on purpose. I need to deal with this behavior. So my hope with this talk is that this will give you all a different perspective to consider, and of course, ways that you can then shift a little bit in terms of how you are interacting with your child. Okay, let's see. Okay, so sorry, now everything's covered again. What is whole body apraxia? What is it actually? And so I included this definition because it's simple in plain language. Apraxia is a neurological motor planning disorder. So the brain knows what it wants to do. It can form the intention. So it has an idea, but the signal from that area of the brain through to the body is disrupted, it's mistranslated, or completely lost in transmission. And so the intended action actually doesn't happen at all or as planned. So we think about it kind of like a GPS, right? That's how I, use it as an example where the GPS knows the destination perfectly, but whose turn by turn instructions, if it keeps cutting out, how frustrating is that for us when we're trying to get to somewhere on time? The map is fine, but the navigation system has a transmission problem. So these are the things that I wanted to talk through today because I want you to think about your child specifically, or if you're a professional, someone that you're working with, and see if any of this throughout my talk resonates. So, when we're talking about whole body apraxia, this isn't a cognitive issue, meaning it's not something that they have difficulty understanding instructions. Okay, it's not about intelligence, it's not about understanding or even being aware. Those with whole body apraxia demonstrate very sophisticated comprehension, but their motor system just can't demonstrate what they know. This is different from speech apraxia or childhood apraxia of speech. When you Google apraxia, what you're going to come up with in the Google page is apraxia of speech, childhood apraxia of speech, speech apraxia, all of that. And so, again, parents coming in to see me were like, "Oh, wow, I knew my child does not qualify for that diagnosis because that diagnosis specifically is given by speech therapists." So, but I do see this inability to follow through with their actions. So think about childhood apraxia of speech, this is what I have here, or CAS, as something that's specifically related to the mouth muscles or forming speech. Okay. Whereas what I'm talking about, and that's why I differentiate it and I say whole body apraxia, it affects every single voluntary movement that we do. And I've listed some here, but some even that you may not be thinking about, right? Facial expression. And the thing with apraxia is that it is typically when we're asking the individual to do something on demand. So something that my family say to me will be, well, when ask them to smile, right? They can't smile on demand, but they will smile, right? And so it's like smiling on demand, like when we're all ready to take a family picture, everybody has to do that intentionally. However, your child may smile or laugh when it isn't something that's being requested on demand. And then something else to think about, that this isn't willful. It's not something they're doing on purpose. I'm going to talk about that in the next few slides. But typically, what we interpret it as is that they are being defiant. But again, thinking through the apraxia piece or the whole body apraxia piece, it is the inability to put their thought or idea or what you're asking them to do into action. Okay, so here's some examples of they can't or they won't. Okay, so if it's won't, the motivation strategies that we try and put into place would make sense. Consequences, if you don't do this, then you're going to lose your iPad. That makes sense too. Repetition and pressure equals progress. So practice, we'll talk about repetition, we'll talk about what that looks like with respect to some of the strategies, but adding in a little bit pressure to the individual when they won't do it, that then you can see progress. Child is choosing not to comply. So it is a intentional choice. If it is, I will not do that. The parent teacher needs to be firmer. That's what we tend to go with, is that you're not being firm because, they're digging their heels in and they won't do it. Now, on the other side of that, so we can think about your child's behaviors as the left side. That's one option. Option B is that they can't, or this is where we see that whole body apraxia, where any of the motivation strategies, it's completely missing the point because it's not about that motivation as much as it's about I can't even initiate my body. Consequence, actually, what you're doing is punishing, that's a strong word, but it's true, that neurological difference, because that's what's happening. The nerves, the connections aren't able to make that whole pathway happen from the idea to the movement. And then pressure increases the anxiety sometimes, and then we get stuck even more. The child is genuinely unable to execute or to complete the motor sequence. And ultimately, teachers and parents and what their strategies are, what they're trying to use isn't working because they do need a different approach. We're going to talk about that. So, how does whole body apraxia affect every part of daily life? Essentially, it does. It affects everything because everything that we do for the most part, requires intentional motor. There's some reflexes like blinking, things like that, where we don't think about it. It's automatic, it's reflexive. But what I'm talking about today is those intentional movements. Speech, right? Speech is something that is intentional. And many of my clients are non-speaking or unreliably speaking. So they do have some speech, but it's not something that they are intentionally saying. Sometimes it's echolalic, sometimes it's repeated, sometimes they're scripts. Social responses, right? Being intentional with our social responses, waving, nodding, turning your head to look at the individual, all of that, all of those things require intention. And yet, when you think about the autism diagnosis, part of that DSM diagnosis, the official, is that they have social and communication delays or differences or challenges, right? Well, if we think about our social interaction, that requires us to be intentional. Eating, using utensils, opening packages, all of that requires intention. Same thing with toileting. So a lot of my clients, unfortunately, with a variety of ages, struggle with toileting. And it's not that they don't want to, or they're just like, I don't care. I don't, especially the older ones. They really do want that control, but their body just struggles to initiate getting to the bathroom, right? So they just can't get up. They can't get out of bed at night. They don't wake up. And there's so many things that impact that. Facial expression, we talked about transitions and starting. So some of my clients and parents will say they struggle with transitioning. Well, if we think about what a transition is having to stop something, then shift and start something. And starting or initiating a movement is actually the hardest thing for somebody with whole body apraxia to do. So when we think about and break down what a transition is, that is, and more than likely, part of the problem is that they really can't get their body to stop something and then start something, and that shift is difficult. So, again, why your child might look willful, like they're doing it on purpose, but they're actually stuck or trapped. So, here's some things that I hear parents say. So, they can do it sometimes. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, whole body apraxia is consistently inconsistent. So that is the consistent part, that they're going to be able to do it one day. They're going to be able to do it an hour ago. And then you ask them to do the exact same thing. And it's like they've never done it before. So it's really, really tricky and frustrating, not only for you as the parent, but certainly for your child. Ignoring instructions. So again, when they don't move. You ask them to go get your backpack. It's time to go to school. Go get your shoes on. And they're still sitting in the chair, right? Go get dressed. We have to get to school, and you walk up and they're still sitting there undressed, right? Now, yesterday they could have done it. So, now it's like, okay, let's go get it done. And they can't. It's not that they didn't understand you. It's not that they didn't hear you. It's literally their body that day cannot make all of those steps to be able to complete the task. Refusing to start, like I said, that initiation of the motor sequence is the hardest part. It's not that your child doesn't want to do it, it's that they're literally stuck and they just can't get that connection started. We'll talk about in a few slides, well, then what do I do, right? How do I do? This is all great, Dana, wonderful, but then what do I do? So we're going to get there, but I'm just wanting to kind of get you to think through, again, your child, and then what are some of these things that you might be seeing. Stopping partway through. This is something too where you're walking into the grocery store and their body stops in the middle of the parking lot. That is something that I hear, and that is part of whole body apraxia. They can't continue. They stop, probably unwillfully, and then they can't start again. Okay, so they get stuck. That's what we talk about. They get stuck in that moment, and it's really frustrating for them, certainly frustrating for you, but also anxiety provoking. And once we get into more of that anxiety or feeling anxious, and then also that fight or flight state, it's then the whole body control is even more challenging. So we're going to talk about what you can do as a parent as well in those moments of stress. And then it looks like they do it when they want to. So remember when I said that when it's not on demand, or, they do want to do something because it's motivating, but with less stress because it's on demand, you'll often see them be able to do it. And then again, you ask them to do it the second, 15 minutes later, and it's something that is difficult. So what is happening in the brain when whole body apraxia is present, or when it's happening and they're getting stuck? Okay, so it's complex, but essentially, when we're talking about voluntary movement, or what we call praxis, so this is something that I did learn when I was going through my master's degree for OT. I learned about apraxia because developmentally, we're studying how does movement happen? How do I learn the skills to be able to crawl, to be able to walk, to be able to play the piano or play a sport? Well, all of us go through these steps. Okay. And it's when we have that breakdown that, again, we go back to, well, is it they're doing this intentionally? They don't want to do it. Or, and this is the shift, is there a breakdown in the sequence? So the sequence is they're forming intention, they have an idea, and then they want to put it into practice. So their brain has to plan, sequence, and organize. The motor cortex selects the program essentially, okay, through that planning, the sequencing, and the organizing, along with the cerebellum, because then the cerebellum says to all the different muscle groups, okay, this is what you need to do to activate that movement successfully. Okay. And then you adjust based on feedback. And that could be verbal feedback. That could be that, as a toddler learning how to walk, they fall, right? They fall down. So the brain takes in all this information as feedback so that you can start to continue to practice these movements. And as you're practicing, you're building these motor pathways that are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then it shifts to being automatic. So, for those of you who are musicians or who play a sport, if you think back to the very first day that you started these activities, you needed to really focus on the activity and you probably made a lot of mistakes. And now, when you're looking back at that and you're now able to, play the music while you are attending or having a conversation with somebody else, because your body is now doing it automatically. Now, with whole body apraxia, any of these steps can be disrupted. And then when we're looking at it from the outside, again, we revert back to what we're seeing is exactly what's going on. But instead, it's actually a breakdown in this sequence. So again, the inconsistency of apraxia, the anxiety buildup affects apraxia, the effort. So sometimes with my clients, we're really trying hard, they're trying hard, and it actually works against them in some instances. And so, again, we'll talk about what we can do. And then, certainly, thinking about planning and sequencing and actually practicing these movements. It's expensive energy wise. It takes a lot of effort. And I find myself responding or repeating that to parents and reminding them that this is really physically taxing and it could just be something simple. And when I say simple, it's simple to us who has the ability to plan, sequence, and organize without even thinking about it. We have automatic movements. We take that for granted. But for those with whole body apraxia, this is something that takes constant effort. And so something as simple as standing up and doing chair squats, right? With chair squats are just standing up and sitting down and standing up and sitting down. And it's one of the movements that I work on with my clients because number one, it's something that their body is familiar with. It's not overly complex, but it's still hard because it's on demand and it's repeated. And so when we're working through, we find, and like I said, I remind parents, this is really fatiguing and they're fatigued, right? Like throughout practicing this. Um, so why your child can do something one day, but not the next. As I said, that inconsistency is challenging. And the inconsistency is also challenging for those professionals that your child might be working with who don't know about whole body apraxia or may know about apraxia, but just equate it to childhood apraxia of speech. So when I was going through my training as an OT, we were not taught whole body apraxia. We were taught dyspraxia. So that might be something familiar to you all. Your therapist may have talked to you about dyspraxia, which, in my opinion, doesn't fully embrace all what I'm seeing with my clients. It's more clumsy. They struggle with balance. They struggle with more complex sequencing of movements. And, with my clients, a lot of them, can scale the top of the banister or the fence outside and have no problem, right? So parents will say to me, well, their motor skills are actually really great. And so I'll ask a little bit more about them. And typically, gross motor skills are a strong skill for them. It's the fine motor skills that are challenging. So then, how is this making sense? Because as an OT going through training, I was taught, some might struggle with those gross motor skills, and then certainly they struggle with more fine motor skills. So I got that, but I was still really when I was introduced to whole body apraxia by some of the clients I work with, I was like, my goodness, this makes sense. And why wasn't I taught about this? Because it is making that connection between the idea and action. And because I was always taught as well that those with more complex autism, they had intellectual disability on top of their autism diagnosis. So it really is more of an intellectual disability, cognitive disability issue, because that's also what it looked like, right? Or a behavioral issue, because that's what it looked like. It looked like they didn't understand, so I had to dumb down what I was saying. It looked like they might need some processing time, so I had to only say it once while I was dumbing down the request. It's short, few words as possible. And then eventually they might do it, or they might not. And so then we'd have to start over again. So all of these things might sound familiar to you, and they certainly were the way that I worked with my clients with complex autism until this really set in. And I dug deep and I looked at more research on this because this is something that all of us need to understand. And so when we're talking about, what does affect um, whole body apraxia. Like we've talked about anxiety and stress level, sleep and fatigue. Now, this one, parents look at me and go, yeah, okay. So my child sleeps 2 hours a night, right? Like I sleep 2 hours a night because my child sleeps 2 hours a night. Well, that is affecting their ability to make those connections and to plan and sequence and organize their motor movements. I mean, if you are one of those parents that your child does not sleep well, you know how you are when you're exhausted. And some of you may sleep or have a child who sleeps, but you don't, or you just are exhausted. That is something where it's a lot for you to learn new motor movements. It would be a lot for you to plan, sequence, and organize because of your lack of sleep and fatigue. Sensory regulation, dysregulation for all of us makes motor planning more challenging. So, more regulated body, the more reliable the motor is. And so, when I'm working with my clients, my shift, actually, I'll kind of go back a little bit to where I, really did have what I call a paradigm shift. It was about 10, 12 years ago at this point. And I had the Century Gym. I had my own private clinic. I had started from scratch and had the swing, had the ball pit, had all the things. And I realized after reading a book by Ido Kadar that he said OT did nothing for me. And that was literally the moment that everything changed because what he said made sense. And he said it wasn't that sensory, integration therapy or sensory activities like the swing and the scooter board and all of that didn't help him. I mean, it helped him to build his motor skills, his fine motor skills, his gross motor skills. It helps with reflex integration. There are purposes to those activities, but he said it didn't do what I really needed it to do. And that was to help me to make those connections so that I could feel a better sense of control over my body. And so since then, my whole gym has changed because now it's not a sensory gym. I still have some of those activities and we still do those and equipment. But from the swing attachment, now we use like a TRX, right? Where we're working more on the physical and working. I have a treadmill, I have a squat rack, I have dumbbells, I have weighted bars, because I can work on building functional movement patterns and give that sensory input at the same time. And they're getting a better sense of their body. That's helping them regulate, that's building confidence, and it's actually addressing what the real issue is. Diet. In on my YouTube channel, I talk about all of these different areas, so in much more detail. And a diet high in ultra processed foods can cause the whole trajectory of gut dysbiosis and inflammation and GI issues. And when somebody's in pain or when their brain is inflamed, this is going to make building that intentional movement or movement at all way more challenging. So, part of what I do when working with my clients is supporting their ability to help, their parents with diet, help coach their body to eat certain foods because I get it. Parents will say, yes, but my child eats three things and they're all high carb based. And I'm like, I get it. I get it because those foods are the body's craving them and they have sensory challenges. So I get it, but we can make slow progress and progress, period, just because I believe 100% that this is one of the biggest things that you can do to support your child's motor planning and building those intentional motor skills. So, what changes for you as a parent or professional when you can understand that this is a motor issue? Okay, so why won't they just listen? Well, their motor system isn't receiving the signal right now. So, what can I change? We're going to talk about that. They're just being stubborn. Now, when I go through these things, I do want to put a little caveat in there and I give this caveat to all the parents that I talk with. And that is your child is still a kid. And developmentally, they're going to go through these changes just like we all did with puberty and the independence and all of those things, right? So, am I saying that every single time that your child looks like they're being stubborn or they don't want to do something is because whole body apraxia? No, they're still a kid. However, it is the least dangerous assumption to assume that it's whole body apraxia and to, we're going to talk about this in a couple slides, coach their motor, coach their body to be able to initiate and then be successful. Because the reality is, they may not want to go to school that day, or they may not want to go and run errands with you, but they have to because they can't stay at home. Or it could be that their body is really stuck and they do love school, but they can't get their body to start. So you're going to do and address the same thing and or do the same thing and use those strategies. But I always put in that caveat. I say it towards the middle or the end only because I don't want that to be the automatic anymore. And typically, when parents say, well, how do you know if it's behavior or whole body apraxia? Treat it like it's whole body apraxia and see what happens. Yesterday they did it, so today they can. May not be the case, as we talked about. This intervention isn't working. Well, the intervention that the majority of my clients go to, like whether it's speech, OT, ABA, some of them have physical therapy or even in the school, because that intervention may assume that they won't, and it's a choice. But we have to remember that in the majority of cases, it's because they can't and they have low ability. And remember, this isn't a cognitive or intellectual issue, this is a motor issue. So here are some questions that we can just, I placed in on the slide just to kind of get you to think through, again, with your own child or a client that you work with. So, what behaviors in your child or client have you been interpreting as won't, but they might actually be can't? So, take a moment, just think things through, one or two. And then when does your child perform a skill most reliably, then less reliably? And then what conditions differ between those times? So, I have my parents take notes and I create a document for them to have and use as a guide to their observations because things to me that are really important for what I know about whole body apraxia parents may not even think about, right? So I want to have those prompts. And one of those prompts that are like, well, are they a morning person or are they an afternoon, evening person? Are they better when they eat? And then I always ask, when they eat what, right? Are you noticing that things aren't going well when they eat? And then what is it that they're eating in that case? So things like that can be really, really telling. And then what are some of the beliefs that you've had about your child's behavior that right now might be starting to shift? Because I will also talk to parents about beliefs and facts, right? Because we all have beliefs. Every single one of us has beliefs about certain things, but not all of those beliefs are facts. And so, what we're observing in our child is more than likely a belief. And so, I try, as I'm working with parents and coaching parents, is they'll explain to me the situation, and I will say, absolutely, that could be true. But there's also this way that it could be true, or this option, right, that it could be true. So it's about kind of thinking this through. And, really, all I'm talking about here is really a mindset shift. And unfortunately, shifting your mindset is the easiest and the hardest thing to do. And so this is a process for a lot of the families that I work with. So the connection between whole body apraxia and some of the behaviors that we are saying, are autism symptoms or this is autism, right? And I talked about the lack of social engagement. So thinking about the things that we are expecting of our children in terms of those socially appropriate things, say hi, or, your child may not be able to speak, right? So they're not going to be able to say hi to somebody or say goodbye or thank you or all that. So you're prompting them and we're practicing that. But then also they might not give those back and forth social interactions either. And again, it may not be because they don't want to. It could be because it requires that intentional movement, not following instructions. So again, you asking them to do something they can't follow through. Repetitive behaviors and stimming. So, stimming is something I talk to families about and really looking at it like regulation for them, right? And so I look at it that way and I'm starting to ask why. Like, what is it the environment? Is it that the demand is too high? And often when my clients are being asked to do something or there's an expectation to do something on demand, that's when we start to see some of those repetitive behaviors. And some of those repetitive behaviors can also be speech and getting into loops and starting to say phrases. So we have echolalia, but it also may be something where I'm working with a client and something gets a little tricky and I'm noticing that increase in dysregulation and stress. And then all of a sudden they turn to their parent. And if they're unreliably speaking, it's like, time to go home, time to go home, time to go home. And, the parent, without, knowing initially, they're going to respond and say, no, we have, 10 more minutes left, or you're almost done, whatever that is. And then we get back to it, and then the same thing happens. And we just start to see this back and forth where now we're engaged in this loop. And it may not be that what they're saying is actually what they want. It may be that now their body's dysregulated and now we're stuck in this loop. And for, again, more information on loops, I have a whole video on that as well. Transitions we talked about, and then just emotional dysregulation. And this I feel too is the emotional part of it, but then also the physical part of it. So working through and building the intentional movement patterns through focused intentional work is exhausting. It's a lot, even though for us, it looks like it's just a simple step, like just step up, right? Just step up. But it's very, very challenging for them. Okay, so some of your children may be involved in other therapies, more traditional therapies. And like I said early on in the talk, I was not taught this information in any of my OT training. And now, slowly, there are more speech therapists, there's more OTs and ABA therapists that are starting to pick up on this. And the two keys that I say over and over to parents about, well, how can I get, my therapist to get on board? Or what should I look for in a therapist for my child who does have whole body apraxia? And I will say there's two things. Number one, they need to understand or at least start to learn about whole body apraxia. And number two, they have to presume competence in your child. And if they're talking about your child in front of them, if they're talking as a 2-year-old when they're 10 or 12 or 15 or 25, that's not presuming competence. If they're teaching them non-age appropriate content, that's not presuming competence either. So, presuming competence is not presuming knowledge. Okay, there's a difference. Presuming competence is I'm presuming that this individual can understand me even though they can't demonstrate that they do. Okay, because demonstration requires intentional motor skills. And so, any of the tests that you have done with or your child has done in the past require intentional motor to point, right? To circle, to write, to speak. All of that is intentional movement. And so if your child had any type of IQ test or academic assessment or behavioral evaluations or OT or speech or and you're told that they have their IQ is 40 or under 100 or they don't have their language comprehension is very, very low. I would caution you on taking those as valid scores because of whole body apraxia, because they don't have a way to reliably demonstrate their knowledge. And often it's interesting because parents that I talk to, and we're talking through this, you almost see them sitting in the chair and they're just like, some just look defeated, some just their face lights up, some it's an emotional, like just all over their face because they'll say to me then, I've always known that my child was in there. Like I've always known that. And, here and I say we because I'm a professional, we've been telling parents because we are the quote unquote experts that it's this or it's that, or they have a score of this or that. And I mean, I completely do things differently now, but you as a parent have been told all these things. And so I get it. I understand. But I'm here to say, you have to go with your gut. You are the expert in your child, and then you form a team, right? And part of that team are these other professionals. But this is something that is told to me over and over, right? Like I know that. And here's an example. I walked into the living room and they had been watching this show on TV, and then I see the letters lined up and they spelled a word. And like uh, that's a lot of cognitive and a lot of motor there. So your child, until they can demonstrate otherwise, and to demonstrate that, you need to practice the skills. And that's part of the challenge with any of the therapies, or AAC devices or any type of, PEC system where you have to go get the card and then you have to give them the card. And all of that is really complex motor. So the biggest thing is understanding that whole body apraxia and understanding that your child is presuming competence and has the ability to understand. And then from there, we can figure out if they need support in other areas. But ultimately, those are the most important things for traditional therapists to really learn and implement in their practices. So, okay, how do I recognize that my child may have whole body apraxia? And this is without, needing a formal report. And here's the thing that I'm asked over and over and over again is, how do I get my child diagnosed with whole body apraxia? Well, whole body apraxia, dyspraxia are actually symptoms. They are not in the formal medical diagnostic manual, the DSM-5. They are not in there. Developmental coordination disorder is actually in there, but it is very challenging to get that diagnosis. I'm not going to say very challenging. It's challenging to get that diagnosis. And the testing to be able to get that diagnosis is often too much for our complex motor, my clients, your children. So I say to parents, assume that that's what it is, because you can use some of these strategies to be able to then help support them. And I mean, you can get OT assessments, of course, and speech therapy PT assessments are going to talk about gross motor skills, fine motor skills, balance, coordination. They might look at reflex integration, things like that, which, all are within the whole body apraxia realm, but it's just that understanding that there is, this disconnect in the neuromotor pathways. Um, they're just not firing properly, and we need to use specific strategies to be able to support and build those pathways so that your child can then become more in control of their body and more proficient at some of those movements. So I'm not going to go through all of this list, but you can take a look at those. Now, okay, so what do we do? What do we do? What do we do if your child, you're thinking through this whole thing and you're like, okay, I'm pretty sure that that's what I'm seeing. Well, number one is supporting regulation. So any of us that we need to do something that's takes intention, so not automatic, but something that's intentional. And it could be, you're learning a new skill, a new sport, a new instrument, how to knit something, right? And you're either anxious, dysregulated, whatever it might be, it is going to be very challenging for you to, one, continue to do that and to sequence and plan and organize your movement. So, something that has to be there is that regulation. Now, for my clients with complex autism, they cannot more often than not, self-regulate. Okay. None of us are built are born, built. None of us are born with the ability to self-regulate. That's why we swaddle, right? We give the input to the infant. That's why we rock, because we give the input, the vestibular input, that calming to help them to learn to self-regulate as their neurological system is being built and developed. Our kids really struggle with that self-regulation. So the expectation, so what I say to parents is that you're the most powerful co-regulator for your child. As an OT, it was like swings. Give them squeezes and hugs. Squish them between, pillows. All of that is great and can help, but you are the most powerful co-regulator. And yeah, I did a video on, just tell your child to calm down. Why aren't they calming down, right? None of us calm down when somebody tells us to calm down. In fact, it's often the complete opposite. So, ways in which you can help co-regulate, bring your voice way down, whisper, right? Even when I'm working with my clients and I start to whisper, I can see everybody in the room just come down. Be more rhythmic. That's why music can be regulating. So, number one, supporting their regulation. Number two, breaking the task down into steps. Now, when I was going through my training, and then when I first my first position as an OT was in the school system, and so I was in and out of classrooms, and one of the things that I would do would be a visual, like breaking things down into steps in using visuals, right? So step number one, put your backpack on the hook. Step number two, put your coat on the hook. Step number three, go to your desk. Like that, what those were breaking it down into steps. And actually, just putting the backpack on the hook probably has about 15 steps for our body to plan, sequence, organize, initiate, carry through with that movement when you have whole body apraxia. So we tend to simplify these steps for those with whole body apraxia, and we have to break them down even more. And I'll talk about this next one, learning to coach the body, right? Coaching the body or motor coaching is essentially the secret sauce. It is it takes practice because it is a completely different language that you'll be learning. It again isn't the miracle where you say something one time and now all of a sudden your child's, doing all these tasks, but it is helping to be that bridge between what you're asking them to do and their body moving. So I talk about it with parents by saying, okay, take the body part and put an action with it. So lift your arm, lift your foot, reach your arm forward, right? All of those are those steps that they have to do in order to put their backpack on the hook. So get your eyes on the hook. Bring your foot forward, bring your other foot forward. Okay, now get your eyes on that hook and reach your arm up to the hook. Like we're really breaking all this down. And as you practice this new skill, of doing it, it will start to become automatic as well. Prompting. I think that I say here, don't fear it, because those of you who have had therapies, I was one of them, where said prompting, they may become prompt dependent. Prompt dependency, that's the everybody fears it. But when you think about you learning a new motor skill, right? So let's say you hired a golf pro teach you how to play golf, and they just said, okay, go play, right? Like, no, I hired you for a reason. So they are going to prompt your body to be able to do this, and they will continue to prompt until you've established that motor plan. And that's the same thing. The other thing with prompting is that we're competing with the outside stimuli that they're a lot of times not able to process because of their sensory system. So with you prompting, and again, it doesn't mean yelling. It typically just means continuously giving them those verbal prompts that to help their body to continue to go and move. So for me, back earlier in the talk, and I was saying I used to, dumb things down, say things one time, and yet they wouldn't move. It's actually causing more stress and anxiety for the individual because they're trying to do it, but they can't. And so I now consistently give verbal prompts all the time. And I pretty much sound like I'm an auctioneer, but I'm not yelling, I'm whispering most of the time, and helping them get their body through the movement pattern. Practice. Practice makes permanent, but it also is a double-edged sword. And this is why. Because when you practice speech over and over again, saying the same thing, it starts to become a loop, right? It doesn't have to be just speech, but any motor movement. If we practice the same thing over and over and over again without variation, or once we have it, now we're going to move on to something else, it can start to become where now we're stuck in the automatic and we're not able to deviate from that. And so I typically see it in verbal loops and, parents like, yes, but we want speech. We want speech. But that can work against you as well, because now we're stuck. And now without responding to them, we get really dysregulated. So it's something that I work on with families as well. So being consistent, motor coaching, and co-regulating for success while you're practicing. And then, consider intentional motor programming. That's what we offer our clients because it's something that we see the benefits of for a number of reasons. And the intentional motor workouts that we're talking about are literally that. It's a workout. It's physical exercise because of what I talk to parents about as far as the benefits of exercise and what that does for health overall, but specifically for your child with whole body apraxia, regulating, giving them input to help regulate, giving them that sensory feedback, building intentional motor pathways, helping them with their metabolic health. We don't talk enough about that, but that is huge. And then neuroplasticity, growing new neurons. Exercise actually helps to grow new brain neurons. So that's why all of us have to do it. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So I get it. And then on top of that, you also have a child that looks like, right? They don't want to exercise. They don't want to move. They're not motivated. But think through that. Is that a belief that you have, or do you actually know that? And so start small, start basic, start with 5 or 10 minutes. I have a video coming out in the next couple weeks that's literally about motor coaching. It's about exercise and just simple movements that you can do with your child just to get started. Because I mean, none of us would stick with exercise if we day one went in to do this massive hour workout that, we couldn't walk the next day. So that's not the goal. Something else that I talk about, you can look at these two and just as example scripts that I hear from families just regarding doctors, family, sometimes family can be sticky because they're the closest to us and they tend to say the things that are the most frustrating. But here are some scripts that you can use with these individuals, family, teacher, therapist, and pediatrician or doctor, right? Because this is something that I hear. Parents will go to their doctor and say, okay, apraxia, whole body apraxia. There's a growing number of physicians that are now recognizing that I get this. This is a disconnect. Autism isn't, just a behavioral issue. We're seeing some of these motor planning things as well. So, really, why did I want to do this seminar? Why do I do what I do? Well, I think that really it's because it comes down to if you don't understand whole body apraxia, there is a real high chance that you're going to misinterpret everything that your child does. You're going to look at things like being stubborn and non-compliant as that's what they're intentionally doing. You'll continue to use strategies that might not work and may make things worse. You might accept the IQ score, right? Or severe autism, profound autism, complex autism, when a lot of it could be part of that motor planning. So thinking through some of these things, that is my goal, that you can see your child clearly, that these interventions that you are currently in right now maybe may not be exactly what your child needs, or it may warrant a discussion with the therapist to be able to start shifting things. Supporting reliable communication. Krystal mentioned at the beginning that part of, well, a major part of what I do really is working to support individuals who are non-speaking and unreliably speaking with communication. And essentially that's what it's based on, teaching the motor skills. I don't teach a child how to spell or an adult, because I see adults as well. I don't teach them how to spell. It's really teaching them the motor skills and then going beyond that and working on the intentional motor piece. And just to help you with your child's relationship, right? When you start to see them in a different light, that is going to then shift your relationship. Not to say that things are now, nothing's frustrating. No, there's still going to be things that are frustrating, but it will help you just think through that there might be another reason why they're doing what they're doing. So next steps, and what you can start doing today, really thinking now that what you're seeing is that they can't instead of they won't. Now, is there a chance that it's they won't? Of course. Of course it is, but I'm going to suggest that the least dangerous assumption here is that they can't, and so coach the motor and help support them. Try motor coaching through all of those things, especially for initiation. Sometimes, actually, a lot of time with my clients, it's just getting the body going and then they can follow through on their own. But it's that initiation that is the trickiest part. Observe your child. You get a lot of information by observing what they're doing. I think that so many of us, and I understand, are so busy, right? They have therapies, you have other kids, you work, there's all these things. And so sometimes we don't take the time to literally just stop and observe. Um, and then lastly, I have here, I have a slide at the end, but learn more about whole body apraxia and what that is. So here you're welcome to take pictures. I mean, you can take pictures of any of them, but this is how you can contact me. That's my email address. And then I do have a little box here at the bottom because I am in the process of creating a number of things for parents and then professionals down the road. But please feel free to email me if you would like to get that information ahead of everybody else, because I will be offering some specials and exclusive things as part of that. So, and then of course, all of my channels are here and you can go right now and subscribe. I actually post typically once or twice a week with videos. And I'm always open to suggestions of topics. So just like Krystal said at the beginning, write those topics that are in my comments as well on my videos and just let me know because I want it to be effective for you and to help you better understand. So that's it. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dana. We have a couple of questions if you have the time. Is that all right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Okay. The first one is Angelita says, my non-speaking son, age 15, is a newly opened speller for 6 months. He spells about his autonomic nervous system, says his heart rate runs out of control, and that's when he loses intentional motor control. It seems like a sympathetic response in and out all day long. It robs him of his ability to do what he really wants. Would there ever be a need for medications, anti-anxiety, or beta blockers to help bridge him while we are working on his primitive reflexes and intentional motor exercises?
That's a great question. I does he do intense like I don't know his sensory motor profile and what that looks like, but I've had a couple clients with this and I've had them wear wearables if they can tolerate that. So like a Whoop, like something, or an Oura ring where they can get their heart rate variability, and then we can get sleep and we can get because all of that I would want to look at before I would work on meds, right? That's just me. And, but obviously working with a medical professional as well. But I also would suggest even using intense, more anaerobic, short bursts of exercise to try and help with that anxiety and just to kind of see. But that's really there could be a number of things happening there. So I would try a variety of things, including like exercise. It could be going. I have a client actually. It just popped into my brain. And he started running and just doing slow, steady running. He started walking actually, and then started slowly jogging. His body was able to do that, and he'd have his mom hired a coach, and they go running, and it just got longer and longer. And that's what really helped support because it's rhythmic. It was low intensity. They weren't going super fast, and that really, really helped him to help support that regulation. So. Yeah, I'm happy to give a little bit more, but just I'd need more detailed information too.
Thank you. Okay, Lisa asks, we have a 5-year-old child in our class who throws objects all the time. He doesn't play with toys, he puts them in his mouth and moves them around and then throws them. It seems purposeful that he's throwing. What are your thoughts on this?
Okay, so it could be. So here we're going to go through this, right? So number one, the option, yes, it could be intentional. But I don't feel that it's always intentional. I think what's happening is because you said he doesn't play, right? So way back when, early on, when I was doing a lot of like more early intervention, and I was actually a DIR floor time therapist before. And so, we would look at those kinds of movements and try and join in. But I really realized that, these clients that I was seeing could not intentionally move their body. They couldn't form these motor plans for play. So my suggestion, like, he needs that support to do anything intentional. So, and this goes with my parents that I talk with all the time. Like, we can't just say stop doing something or go find something to do because that requires intentional motor control, right? So for him just to stop, to sit in the chair, to not do anything, his body just doesn't have the intentional ability, the planning, sequencing, organizing, control, impulse control. He can't stop his body from doing it. He needs to work on strictly building more gross motor plans, even though you're like, oh, yeah, he can throw. He's got a wicked sidearm. But that's because it's practiced over and over again, impulsively and not intentionally. So I mean, I know you're in a classroom setting, but keeping his body intentional, can it be something where somebody sits beside him and he's literally just putting stickers on a page, right? Like because and somebody's helping him, like it might be giving him the sticker because fine motor skills, giving him the sticker, putting it on the page. He gets another sticker, puts it on the page. That's intentional, right? The moment that the body isn't being intentional, it may start to become impulsive. But the great thing is you can't be intentional and impulsive at the same time. So living in impulsivity. He needs coaching and support to be able to be intentional. He can't do it. The expectation shouldn't be that he just stops and he's not doing it. You're literally going to just be on this hamster wheel.
Absolutely. Okay, we have another one from Caitlin. My child screams a lot. He screams more than he doesn't. He is high-pitched all the time. Stims and lots of repetitive behaviors. Obsessions with ocean animals. We are gluten dairy free, cleaning up his methylation pathway, and on supplements and leucovorin. His speech improved with leucovorin, but I'm constantly saying he does it when he wants to. I'm wondering if some of his behavior is tied to full body apraxia.
Yeah. I 100% believe that that's what is happening, part of what's happening. The screaming piece of it, that could be a few things. It could be sensory related. The question I would ask you is when he's doing something intentional, is he screaming, or is it just when he's not like, you're having to do other things, right? You can't attend to him 100% of the time. So if he's left to kind of just go play kind of thing, is that typically when the screaming happens? Because that's when that would, I would think in the pattern. So I would want to learn a little bit more about those instances. And this goes back to, when I'm working with families, what are the questions that I ask them, what are those observation forms? Because this is what's really helpful. But again, it goes back to the expectation shouldn't be that he can be intentional. Right now, after everything that I've talked about, you're understanding that this is where he doesn't have control to initiate something. And so his body has to move. He's got to go do something. And so for him, that screaming might be impulsive. And then this is the double-edged sword. The more that you practice something, just like the throwing whatever that student had, that's going to also myelinate, right? That's going to become permanent. That's what myelination means. It starts to become permanent. And so I say to families too, you don't unlearn how to ride a bike. And there's a reason for that. But it goes the same way with, some of these motor pathways that we unintentionally made permanent. It's really hard to just stop that and to expect, oh yeah, we're not going to do it. Now, you can, and the way that you do that is you practice intentional movement. So building that, but they can't do it on their own. So finding a therapist that could support and understand that would be huge for him and you.
Okay. Lindsay asks, I am trying to get the OT at school to write a goal for regulation for school. My son is a one-to-one aide that could help with that co-regulation. Do you have any suggestions or advice on what that goal could look like?
Yeah, I know it's so tricky when you're in the school because it has to be academically related. But I don't know if you're able to talk with her, the aide, but honestly, just her, like I said, like literally practicing grounding herself and just like shutting everything else out in the room and just he and her sitting there and she's just grounded. And then she is whispering to him and coaching his body and, talking to him like he's his age, all of those things. But certainly, the OT might just, again, traditional OT, that's in the school would be, sensory breaks and things like that. Like, let's work on and give different sensory tools and sensory toys and give squeezes and input. And again, she's going to be the most effective and the most powerful co-regulator that he has, especially, and it's great that it's one-on-one, so it's consistent. Um, but I know I'm not like giving a great answer to you, but I would see if the OT can help with or write a goal for the para to, work on just it could be breathing, but again, breathing strategies. Again, I don't know how old your child is. That's intentional, right? So for you, I would work on, and I say this to parents, I would work on breathing, like deep breaths, right? Super regulating, activating that parasympathetic response. But we can't ask them to do that in the middle of having a complete dysregulation meltdown. So we have to work on that when they're calm. And then we coach the motor to be able to do that. So doing it like before bed, let's every night add into our routine, let's take 3 deep breaths. So then when it is during a time of stress and anxiety, that it will be more automatic because it's practiced. But yeah, as far as like it's probably going to be something like go to the sensory room. And again, now we have to transition and that could activate more stress. It's tricky, but find out what is something that he is regulated by that as his mom, and then I would see if that OT would write that into his goal. Like, I don't think it has to be super specific. It can just be regulation. Could be going for a walk, like let's go outside down the hall. Like he has permission to go for a walk. Things like that, because that's intentional movement, and then he can work on some breathing out there too.
Right, right. And we didn't talk, every child has the right to the least restrictive environment and free, appropriate public education. And something I know that has been so regulating that you've taught me for a lot of students is access to age-appropriate material and curriculum. And so even if they're not active, what looks like actively participating in that, having access to that in school can be really regulating as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Cheryl says, my son, an unreliable speaker, is having trouble getting himself out of bed in the morning. He obviously knows how to get out of bed, but keeps on saying, I need 5 more minutes. This can go on for hours every morning, and often he doesn't come out until noon to eat breakfast. What are your suggestions?
Remind me how old he is, Crystal?
It does not say.
Okay. Because I'm just like, well, if he's 15,
Right. Yep.
right? But if, but I get it, right? Like we have to get out because there's, school or whatever. Definitely I would work on coaching. But here's the thing too, is that at a certain age, I will say to my clients, like, I'm presuming competence in you. And so, what that means, in addition to that you understand me and that you want to learn, is that you also want control of your body. So, presuming competence in your body. So, I am going to put some onus on you to be able to, because when you empower someone and you give them some responsibility in this, again, age appropriate, um, they're going to rise to the occasion. Like, I think that's a big part of this is like when we don't have expectations because we don't think they can understand and we have to dumb everything down, they're only going to rise to whatever the expectation is, right? The expectation is that, they're going to match these colors. And so that's what they do, or they don't because they're so bored that now they're getting dysregulated. But no, I'll sit with the client and just be like, okay, I know that you can do this. And so when you and mom practice at home, I want you to take some responsibility with this. She's going to coach you, she's going to help you, but I want you to have a part in this too. Right. And so for him, it would be like, okay, I get it. You might want to stay in bed, but you have to get up because we have to do XYZ. So I'm going to coach your body and get up. And so you're going to help him initiate. You're going to break that task down, coach his body through step-by-step prompting and see what happens. You may not have to do it for very long because it's just that initiation part of it. And that's what some of my clients tell me actually. When they do, they'll say, I do want to get out of bed, but I can't. I cannot physically move. And so if you can help coach him, let's see what happens with that.
Okay, thanks. And Dana, I want to be respectful of your time. We have so many
Yeah.
good questions. So please, if we did not get to yours, take down her email address.
Mhm.
If we can just end with one last one. As you know, NAA is highly focused on safety. And to kind of answer to the initiation, the other side of that is inhibition. And
Mhm.
Carol says, I assume she's talking about her child or student. His body doesn't work, but he is high risk for running. What helps? So can you talk a
Mhm.
little bit about inhibition,
Yeah.
safety?
Yeah, and that is the other side of it, Crystal. And it's stressful because you're pulling into the parking lot and you're just like, okay, what's going to happen? And it's frustrating until we kind of really understand it because it's like I told him, and he just runs. Um, Again, safety is always number one. So, when I don't like physical anything because me doing something and doing hand over hand or whatever is not building the intentionality that needs to happen for them to build those motor pathways. So, we may not get a lot of movement, but that individual did those three tasks completely independently with motor coaching in the hour. It was only three, but they did it. That's a huge win. But when it comes to safety and that inhibition, I do a lot of inhibition work in a controlled environment that's safe. So, and for us, it's like, okay, this is like really simple, Dana. Like, what is going on? So, here's an example. I will have two visual cues. So, I'll use I have these plastic circle dots, I call them, and I'll have a yellow one. I'll put it on the floor in one of the rooms, and then the other side of the room, I'll have a purple one. And so, I'll just explain to my client, I'll say, okay, I'm going to help you get your body on the yellow circle, and I want you to pause your body there. And then I want you to, when I say, okay, ready and go to the purple, then you're going to get your eyes on the purple. You're going to walk to the purple and you're going to stop your body on the purple. Seems super simple. It is so hard for those with inhibition challenges. But that's what we have to work on. So we can't expect that we're going to go and work on this when you get out of the car in the parking lot at the grocery store. That's when you're like, I don't care, I'm holding your body, right? Because that's for safety 100% of the time, and do whatever you need to do for safety in your house. But for those exercises that I would work on with them, that is something that I would do. And I do that with a lot of my clients with that inhibition because it's so hard for them just to stand on a circle and keep their body still. Now, having said that, there is probably some other things going on. Vision could be a component, more than likely it is, and the sensory piece of it. So, sensory drives motor. Everything that we are processing in the room that you're in right now is affecting your ability to be successful with your motor movements. So, if he's somehow, overstimulated or understimulated, depending on what his brain is doing, that is going to affect that impulsivity as also. And same thing with his vision, which I didn't get into at all, but that's a really big component of it as well.
Thank you so much, Dana. Such helpful information. And for all of you still listening, please join our newsletter or visit our website. We have two more webinars scheduled. One is Autism and the Criminal Justice System, a Preventative Approach. That date is TBD. And then on April 9th, we have Life Plannings for Special Needs with financial planner Michael Beloff. And again, if you have topics that you want to hear from, we're here to talk about it all. We'd love to hear your recommendations. So thanks for joining us. We're so glad we're getting a lot of positive messages about how helpful this has been for so many parents. So thank you, Dana. Thank you for that. And this recording will also be available on our website. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.